Hello humans, Master DinnerFlax here, and today I'll be going over a deck profile from a very forgotten era of Yu-Gi-Oh! People think of the big eras like Teledad, Goat format, Dragon Rulers, but they forget there were so many formats in between that were also very good, and I wanted to go over this one. It was exactly 1 year after Goat Control, and this format didn't really have a name and this format itself was actually very interesting in how it played. I'll kind of explain how this format worked later, but let's get into the deck profile. 2 Magician of Faith, recycling outs, recycling power spells like Greed, Avarice, recycling one-ofs like Nobleman or Snatch Steal, Confiscation. It's very good. Just recycling for a basic plus or 1-for-1, regardless of how small it was, resolving certain cards in the game could just let you win. 2 Gold. This card was recently released before this format started, and it had quite a huge impact, surprisingly. The reason it had such an impact is because Graceful Charity just got off the ban list for its last time being legally playable. And then Spirit Reaper was starting to be played as a 3-of in people's stacks. So, Spirit Reaper as a 3-of really changed the format, because beforehand, Goat format, you couldn't play Spirit Reaper because of Parshath, but now, ever since Scapegoats going to 1 reduced the chance of people playing Parshath, people max Spirit Reapers. They max the number of Spirit Reapers so you could play. And just put them in a deck, but people really couldn't answer Spirit Reaper back then. So when Gold came out, it changed a little, because when Spirit Reaper would go for that direct attack and discard Gold, not only would Gold special summon itself, but that Gold will target the Spirit Reaper and another card your opponent controls and destroy them. So you outed the Spirit Reaper, got a 2300 body on board in an amazingly slow format, and destroyed an additional card for a +2 and 23 on board. It was incredibly powerful for its time. And not just because of Spirit Reaper, but also cards like Confiscation and Graceful Charity very much benefited from having Gold in your deck. Now, to Dekoichi, it helps you get to the pieces you need at certain times, like drawing into a Gold when you have a Graceful, or drawing into a Spirit Reaper when you're under pressure, or a Smashing Ground when you're under pressure. Just very solid card for its time. 2 Cyber Dragon, very oppressive card. As soon as it came out at the edge of Goat format, it changed the game a lot. It made Chaos decks way more aggressive. It was the first time in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where a person can go second and benefit. So Cyber Dragon, I mean, honestly, a lot of people played 3. Quite a few people still played 2 though, but yeah, it was all up to preference. But summoning a Cyber Dragon and letting its summon stay there was devastating. Here's the thing about Spirit Reaper. People did not play 2. They either played 1 or 3, which is kind of weird. Spirit Reaper, if you played 1, it's because you feared your opponent, a lot of your opponents at a tournament would have Gold in their main deck, so you only played 1 just for stall. But when you played 3, you were confident that tournament would not have a lot of Gold. So you played 3, and you would just punish your opponent for not playing Gold in their deck, and it would be very devastating, because attacking their hand in a time where gaining resources is very hard, when Pot of Greed is banned, when Graceful Charity is at 1, but that's only a 1-for-1 unless you get a Dark World. So Spirit Reaper, awesome card. It stays alive for a very long time, lets you tribute over for a Monarch. It's very strong card for its time. Honestly, there should be 3 in here. I just didn't have enough room for the example deck. For the Warriors, we got 1 Warrior Lady of the Wasteland, Exiled Force, Level 2 Mystic Swordsman, DD Assailant, DD Warrior Lady, and Dawn Zalug. Now, Warrior Lady of the Wasteland is kind of interesting. A lot of people were off and on about this. Warrior Lady of the Wasteland, a lot of people liked it because of its versatility with Pot of Avarice. Being able to get an extra name in the grave to resolve Avarice quicker and also just the fact that when it dies, it can get an Exiled Force, which Exiled Force was a powerful card at the time because of priority, but also because of Mystic Swordsman level 2 and DD Warrior. I don't have DD Warrior in this deck, but if you play 2 Warrior Lady, you wanted to play a DD Warrior. But Mystic Swordsman level 2 was an incredibly powerful card at the time because, like I said, the format was a lot slower. Beat sticks were hard to come by, but there was a lot of setting. And being able to just search for level 2, or search for an exiled, or just search for a level 2, stop a flip effect, kill Spirit Reaper before it ever flips face up, because Spirit Reaper was so huge at this time. It was amazing. Like, this card was very powerful. And then we got the 2 DDs. This was at 1, this was at 1, but they were both very powerful. Your opponent would be able to out a Monarch, a Chaos Sorcerer, a Cyber Dragon. Big things you could just out with these and then banish them. Even though Return and Dimension Fusion were cards at this time, just removing the threats for a little bit, or like summoning Cyber Dragon and then banishing it with Warrior Lady, could help you push for game. And then Don Zalug acted as a Spirit Reaper too, hand control wise, but like I said, if you played 1 Spirit Reaper, you also probably didn't play Don Zalug because you feared the gold in that tournament. And for the rest, 1 Song Gun staple. Like, format's so slow, there's so much setting, there's so many small weenie monsters with powerful effects you need to resolve. Breaker was at 1. Breaker was at 1 for a long time, so Breaker's still 1. Well, he's not still at 1 for us, but he's still at 1 in 2006 compared to 2005. Zaborg. Now, Monarchs, people were very undecisive about how they wanted to play Monarchs. Thestalos, Mobius, Gramarg, Zaborg, those were the 4 Monarchs they had to choose from, and people like Zaborg and Mobius the most, because Gramarg is just a lesser Zaborg in most scenarios. Even being able to destroy set, spell, or trap wasn't very impactful, but destroying a set monster, you might as well just play Zaborg then. And then Thestalos was actually a good Monarch. The issue is just the same with gold. Like, if you discard your opponent's gold, you're in a really bad position. Because the Monarch A didn't pay for itself, and then you went -2, so realistically you went -3 by summoning Thestalos, and it was very risky. But Mobius is the only Monarch at the time that could let you go +1. So it was Mobius and Thestalos at this. Mobius and Zaborg at the time. Those were the main Monarchs. And last monster is the Chaos Sorcerer. Chaos Sorcerer, after it was done being at 3, it was banned. Like, immediately banned. Chaos Return decks were so big at this time. I could have showed a Chaos Return too, but I wanted to show the more raw side of this format. How the format was really played before it got to the end of its era. I wanted to show it like that. Chaos Sorcerer was a staple in any possible deck that could summon it. It was a mini BLS. It was a huge body on board, which was very difficult to get to at the time. And banishing monsters and being very oppressed by just 1 Chaos Sorcerer, much less 3, was very, very good. For spells, Smashing Ground. You didn't have Dark Hole. You had Lightning Vortex, but Sinister wasn't around, so you just wanted to just immediately destroy their monster. No one summoned more than 2 big monsters at a time, so you just wanted to Smashing Ground. 2 Rhoda to search out your warriors. If you wanted to fuel avarice, go for this. Kill something, do that. Destroy a set, get that. Trying to out a big monster, get that. Poke at the hand, get that. The last time Graceful Charity was playable. I believe it was playable, the format after that, but then it's banned and never played again. Graceful, very good. Draw 3, discard dead cards, discard Dark Worlds, discard Light and Darks for Chaos Sorcerer. Very strong. Confiscation, it was kind of interesting. This card was actually legal and not very light. This card was not very powerful for its format, but it later became more powerful in formats with only one Spirit Reaper because people then strayed away from gold. But yeah, Confiscation, you just had to play it. Even though you feared gold, sometimes you just had to play Confiscation in dire moments where you just need to get ahead. And Confiscation usually didn't even work when you were losing. It only worked when you were winning. Unlike Graceful, where it's always live. You can only really use Confiscation when you're trying to get ahead, when you're already ahead. Book of Moon was at 1, very powerful card. Enemy Controller, it was at 1. It wasn't at 1, it was at 3, but you played 1 as a defensive card that didn't lose out to Genzo. That was the only reason people really played it. And sometimes you could push for game with it, but it was not very often that you could do that. Heavy Storm was staple, you had to play it to stop burn decks and stuff. Nobleman was at 1 in a format where it definitely shouldn't have been. Because this format honestly had more setting than Goat Control, but Goat Control had more Noblemans. And it was very interesting, that interaction. It's probably just because of that reason that there was more setting in this format. But Nobleman, very powerful. You always wanted it. You wanted to even resolve it more than once if you had this card. Pot of Avarice. Immediately as it came out, it went to 1. This card's insane. Recycle things like recycle engines, get back boss monsters you wouldn't be able to normally, draw two fresh cards, like very, very strong. Premature Burial, you guys know what this does. This is very powerful for its time. Snatch, Steal, same thing. For the traps, 2 bottomless. Now this is actually really cool because Goat format didn't play this, but as soon as Goat format ended, or really, as soon as Cybernetic Revolution came out, this card became unbelievably powerful. Because the only way you didn't lose going first is if you had Bottomless for their Cyber Dragon. And that's the only reason why people started playing Bottomless, is because of this card right here. But then people started to realize more over time just how strong Bottomless as a card was. So they just kept playing it, even though people were straying away from Cyber Dragon a little bit for some time to play like Golds and Chaos Sorcerers and Monarchs. But it was still a very strong card because it could out things you couldn't normally out. Even with priority, sometimes just dealing with the monster is enough. Sakaretsu Armor. You didn't have Deep Prison. Deep Prison didn't come out until a long while later, which most people don't know. But Sakaretsu Armor, you had to play to defend yourself. Honestly, Call the Haunted, staple, torrential. And that trap hole should actually just be a Mirror Force. Mirror Force. Yeah. Mirror Force, broken card, you had to play it. Ring of Destruction wasn't legal at this time too, which I thought was interesting. Because it came back legal in the next format. But this is what I want to describe about the format as a side deck. In 2006, you didn't side like you do now. In 2006, when you sided, you were actually just completely changing your deck. Because, let's say, if you're playing a lot of Spirit Reapers and your opponent's playing Golds, you want to change your deck up to where you're not losing to Gold. And if you're the person playing Gold, you're going to assume they're siding out the Spirit Reapers, so you're going to side into more aggressive beaters. But if you're your opponent's opponent, then you're assuming he's going to side out his Golds because he thinks I'm siding out my Spirit Reaper, and there's this constant loop of what do I keep in, what do I keep out, how do I play around how my opponent's going to side. And pretty much your side deck was 15 cards you wanted to put in your deck, but you couldn't because of the format. So let's get into it. Double Kaiku for Chaos Return is the only actual side deck card of the format. And people actually just mained it a lot because it was that powerful. And Kaiku just attacking the grave was really good. 18 underbody was nothing to bluff at back then. Air Knight Parshoth, when you thought your opponent was going to side in Spirit Reapers, you sided in this because even if they had it in defense, you're just going to keep doing damage to them and drawing. So it's really good. Genzo to stop trap burn. and people mained it, so it's not really a side deck card. It's just when you thought your opponent was going to side in more back row, you sided in Genzo. Magical Merchant is actually very interesting. It was a really highly played card before this format because Magician of Faith was at 1. But you still played it in this format, just less of it. But digging to a power spell or digging to an out was just very strong, and it was the thing you really wanted to do. This was really funny. Sand Moth. Sand Moth, you played if you thought your opponent was going to play set destruction like level 2. You played Sand Moth because when it dies by this card or another card that destroys sets, you get it back as a 2k beater, which was huge, which was absolutely massive for its time, and especially if your opponent just summoned this without like having a Cyber Dragon to back it up. It's very brutal because they devoted their entire normal summon to a 900 attack monster that did nothing. And then Spirit Reapers, like I said, you cycle out the Spirit Reapers, you cycle out the golds. It's really what made this format, I thought, very interesting, is how much cycling the side deck did. And then Strike Ninja. This was actually a main deck card for a lot of people. And the way I can describe it is like Evil Swarm Thunderbird. Its effect is, once per turn during either player's turn, you can banish 2 dark monsters from your graveyard and banish this card until the end phase. So you can use this to dodge things back then, like Snatch, Steal, Smashing Ground, Book of Moon, just all kinds of things you could dodge with it. But also in return decks, it was just very powerful, just returning all your stuff. But this was interesting for Monarchs. This actually just shouldn't be in this side deck, but if you're playing Monarchs, sometimes you'll just eat damage to keep the tribute fodder. And also this was very good because in the standby, if you know your opponent has Cyber Dragons, you can just banish this into your standby and they can't Cyber Dragon you. Even though they did have priority, they didn't have it in standby. One, My Body as a shield for if you thought your opponent was going to have more Smashing Grounds next game. 2 Royal Decree if you thought your opponent was going to side in more back row. 1 Acid Trap Hole for if you thought your opponent was going to side in more Spirit Reapers. Another thing, like all this cycling. Dust Tornado for extra back row removal. This is another actual side deck card. It's just in case you go against Burn. It was a very popular side deck card at the time. It just seems really good, and it kind of fell out of favor eventually, but it was okay for its time. And in 1 Sakuretsu Armor, like I said, if you need to, you can side into more back row, like side in Armor, side in Trap Hole, side in like more defense to go like more stunny. But that's it. I just wanted to show you guys this format because I thought it was very cool. It's a format we'll probably never see again just because of the pace of the game. Because honestly, I believe this is the slowest that Yu-Gi-Oh has ever been in this format. It is the slowest that Yu-Gi-Oh ever was, just because of how unbelievably slow the game was. Like all the setting, all the little beaters, all the tiny pokes you had to get in with Spirit Reaper. I thought this format was the only one where you could see smoke screen sides be countered by anti-smoke screen sides. Like siding in this format was very, very, very weird, and it was very cool to see how people described it. But that's going to be it, YouTube, and remember, Master DinnerFlax will take your soul.